Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh. One way to quickly end a war is to kill the leader of your enemy. And this is precisely what Ukraine attempted to do. On the 23rd of April, Kiev used a Kamikaze drone that was laden with about 17 kilograms of explosives. Acting on basis of an intelligence report, the UJ-22 drone was launched by the Ukrainian armed forces with the intent to take down the Russian president. But as things turned out, the drone crashed 19 kilometers outside of Moscow, and the Russian President Vladimir Putin was unharmed. Our next report gets you the details. Did Ukraine try to assassinate Vladimir Putin? This is a question that will have far-reaching consequences in the Ukraine war in the days to come. According to reports in the German media, one of Ukraine's top Kamikaze drones was launched on the 23rd of April. Its target was the newly constructed Rudnevo Industrial Park near Moscow, because the Ukrainian Secret Service had got wind that Vladimir Putin would visit the industrial park on Sunday afternoon. What should worry the Russian strategists is that the Ukrainian drone managed to sneak into the Russian airspace. It flew for over 500 kilometers, and the assassination bid failed only because the drone, that was fitted with 17 kilograms of special explosives, the type that is mostly used by the US and Canadian armed forces, crashed about 19 kilometers east of Moscow. But the question is this: did Vladimir Putin visit the Rudnevo Industrial Park on Sunday? No one can be sure. Security analyst Glenn Grant believes that Ukraine was not behind this assassination attempt. According to him, this drone strike is most likely the handiwork of elements within the Donetsk region who may have had some outside help.
This comes into the same basket as the attacks in and around Donetsk, which are clearly done by the Russians, not actually done by the Ukrainians. My view is that if the Ukraine is intent on killing Vladimir Putin, they will do so, because it's too serious for them to play around with. Let's just say that. They wouldn't use one drone, they'd use 5 or 6.
Vladimir Putin's movements are closely guarded. His visit to Mariupol on the 19th of March was described as spontaneous and was announced post facto. Another aspect of Vladimir Putin's security is the use of body doubles. Western media is awash with reports that Vladimir Putin is regularly using body doubles, either due to security reasons or because he is physically incapacitated due to health concerns. But Putin himself has repeatedly rubbished reports of him using a body double.
И отказаться от таких двойников. Это было в самые тяжелые времена борьбы с терроризмом.
То есть в начало нулевых?
Да.
Просто чтобы дублер ехал там, где стрёмно для...
Ехал, появлялся там.
То есть нет?
Нет.
On the battlefield, the stakes continue to get higher with each passing day. On the 29th of April, a drone strike on Sevastopol in Crimea sparked a massive fire at an oil depot. Although, like in the past, Ukraine has not officially claimed responsibility for this strike. After a hiatus of over a month, Russia resorted to the use of missile strikes across Ukraine. Cities such as Kiev, Uman and Dnipro were peppered with over 23 missiles, in which more than 25 people lost their lives.
I felt that it was a very strong wave and everything just fell down on me and my granddaughter. The windows and the glass and the ground. Everything in the house just fell. What did we feel? I don't know. I didn't have the time to get scared. I just took the child and threw her out into the corridor, and only then I thought I had glass at my legs.
On the 19th of April, Ukraine received its first batch of Patriot missile defense systems, and the Ukrainian people feel that this will make their airspace much more secure.
We have faith and we believe in our air defense, in our Ukrainian armed forces, and we hope that this will not happen again. And while we are sitting here, we will not be sad, but will support the spirit of our country. We know that we are invincible. Glory to Ukraine.
The much-touted Ukrainian spring counter-offensive against the Russians hasn't yet materialized, but reports of assassination attempts have now plunged the war into a whole new territory, where it is difficult to predict what turn the Ukraine war will take in the coming days. Finland's accession into the NATO military alliance has altered the security framework of the Arctic on a very fundamental level. Although initially reluctant, Russia has now inked a historic maritime security deal with China. And what this means is that Moscow and Beijing are now joining hands to take on the NATO presence over the Arctic ice. The Arctic Council has 8 nations, and when Sweden too joins the NATO military alliance, then 7 of the 8 nations of the Arctic Council will be part of the NATO military alliance. So how is Russia planning to take on the NATO military alliance in one of the coldest regions of planet Earth? Our next report gets you the details. The scramble for the Arctic is well and truly underway. The Arctic is one of the coldest and one of the most hostile environments in the world. Just about 4 million people live here. But according to the United States Geological Survey, the Arctic is home to an estimated 25% of the world's oil, gas and mineral deposits. And the Arctic's melting ice has changed the geopolitical realities of the region. There are 8 nations that fall or border the Arctic zone: Russia, United States, Canada, Denmark, Norway, Iceland, Sweden and Finland. And amongst these, it is Russia that has an overarching presence at the Arctic. But with Finland joining the NATO military alliance and Sweden too on the verge of jumping onto the American military bandwagon, the Arctic ice shelf is increasingly beginning to look like the NATO ice cap. So how does Russia counter this? By bringing in an ally with formidable economic and military might to blunt NATO's edge. China is 1,400 kilometers away from the Arctic Circle, but Beijing likes to describe itself as a near-Arctic nation, with the stated ambition of wanting to become a polar great power by 2030. On the 25th of April, in the Russian city of Murmansk, close to the Finnish border in the Arctic Circle, Russia and China signed a deal for maritime law enforcement for the Arctic. At this moment, China has invested a staggering $90 billion in infrastructure assets at the Arctic. To counter NATO, Russia is also encouraging other non-Arctic nations like India, Iran and Saudi Arabia to expand their commercial presence. In the course of the last decade, Russia has been aggressively expanding its Arctic defense capabilities. Russia's coastline accounts for almost about 53% of the Arctic Ocean, and it is here that Russia has stationed its hypersonic missile systems. In the last few years, Russia has reopened 50 previously closed Soviet-era military posts. It has refurbished 13 air bases, 10 radar stations and 20 border outposts. The Russian Special Forces are also a part of the Arctic Brigade and have been deployed for military drills and exercises. In 2017, Russia unveiled an ultra-modern military base on the Franz Josef Land island called the Arctic Trefoil. This is Russia's northernmost military outpost and is the second of its kind facility after Kotelny. It is now home to the upgraded Nagorskoye Air Base and provides Russia with air, sea and land capabilities. The Kola Peninsula is the epicenter of Russia's Arctic power projection. It is here that Russia is estimated to have stationed its highest number of nuclear weapons. The Gazievo submarine base at the Kola Peninsula has been expanded, and the nearby Plesets Cosmodrome is widely used for testing Russia's latest military hardware. The Novaya Zelmaya Island in the Russian Arctic is home to the Rogochivo Air Base. Additional radar and electronic warfare equipment has also been set up. In 2019, S-400 air defense missile systems were also deployed at Rogochivo. The Tixi Air Base in Central Eastern Russia has been significantly expanded by 11 new structures in total. S-400 air defense missile systems will be stationed here, supplemented by radio technical regiments. The Kotelny Island, which is one of the largest Siberian islands, is equipped with a state-of-the-art Trefoil military compound, along with Sopka-2 radar facilities and missile launch vehicles. Russia views the Arctic as its future. It has deployed more military resources than all other NATO nations combined at the Arctic. And now, by joining hands with China, Russia is planning to push NATO out of the Arctic Circle. The civil war in Sudan has brought life to a standstill. While the focus of the global media has been on diplomats and foreign nationals who got caught in the violence that suddenly exploded in this head-butting contest between the two military generals, few have focused their attention on the common people of Sudan. Remember, civil wars, ethnic conflicts and social strife is not new to the people of Sudan. But even then, this is a conflict like no other that has gripped Sudan in the last few decades. Be it the ethnic violence of Darfur or the Blue Nile and the southern Kordofan crisis. It was the Sudanese government that was fighting against an armed militia or a rebel group. But the RSF is not a rebel group, but rather a paramilitary force that was created by the government. So how has this impacted the lives of the common people of Sudan? Our next report gives you the details.
Fighting between the Sudanese army and the powerful paramilitary group called the Rapid Support Forces, or the RSF, continued for a second week. Multiple truce efforts since the fighting broke out on the 15th of April have failed. Over 500 people have been killed so far and more than 4,000 wounded in the fighting. With the toll likely to rise even further given the sketchy details available, hospitals have been shelled with more than 2/3 out of service. In the final hours of the 3-day ceasefire that was repeatedly broken, the army and the RSF agreed to a 72-hour extension following pressure from the Saudi Arabian government and the United States.
First, we are very actively working to extend the ceasefire. We've had a 72-hour ceasefire, which, like most ceasefires, is imperfect, but nonetheless has reduced violence, and that's obviously created somewhat better conditions for people in Sudan. It's also enabled some humanitarian assistance to continue to move around. But we want to make sure that, if possible, this is extended. We're very actively engaged on that.
More importantly, the foreign representatives are hoping for the ceasefire to be followed by a de-escalation plan that was mapped out in an April 20th blueprint for peace. Violence, though, has now spread beyond the capital city of Khartoum. The war-ravaged western region of Darfur is particularly vulnerable. Food supplies to an estimated 50,000 acutely malnourished children in western Darfur has been disrupted. Civilians in Khartoum and elsewhere are trapped in their homes, enduring severe shortages of food, running water and electricity. Those who can afford to and are willing to risk their lives are taking the long and risky journey to flee the country. Desperate, homeless and fleeing to save their lives, they do have a question for the warring generals responsible for the chaos.
I asked Burhan and Hemeti that today they end the war because the Sudanese people are suffering and they don't deserve this. And I ask you to sit on a negotiation table and to resolve your issues because this is your own conflict, not that of the Sudanese people. God will judge you in this life and the next.
The United Nations has cautioned that if the fighting continues, as many as 270,000 people could flee Sudan. Since fighting erupted, 14,000 Sudanese refugees have crossed the border into Egypt, besides 2,000 people from 50 other countries. At least 20,000 people have escaped into Chad, 4,000 into South Sudan, 3,500 into Ethiopia, and 3,000 into the Central African Republic. In a war where both the warring factions have utterly disregarded the laws and norms of war, the future looks rather bleak.
At least 16 people, mostly policemen, were killed and over 50 others were wounded in two powerful explosions that ripped through a Pakistani police station on the 24th of April. Such was the impact of the explosions that it leveled the counter-terrorism department in Kabul town of the Swat Valley. The Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif initially described the blasts as a suicide attack, but later he retracted that statement and tweeted that the nature of the blast is presently being investigated. What's also interesting is that no one has claimed responsibility for the attack, although in recent months the Pakistani Taliban have been responsible for a wave of attacks that have specifically targeted the police personnel in Pakistan. Our next report gets you the details.
The northwest SWAT Valley of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province was rocked by twin explosions this past Monday, which happened inside the counter-terrorism department police station. Not only was the police station completely blown apart, but even the nearby buildings, including houses, a mosque and a school, were also damaged due to the impact of the explosions. Security forces and rescue teams rushed to the site to rescue people trapped under the debris and to move the injured to nearby hospitals. A state of emergency has been imposed in all the hospitals of the district.
यहाँ पे 16 शहादतें कंफर्म हुई हैं और 50 से ज़्यादा इंजर्ड है.
It is confirmed that 16 policemen were martyred and more than 50 were injured. The blast took place in the old CTD police station. The explosives were on the first floor. All the explosives, RPGs, mines, etc. were under trial for different legal cases.
Mines भी थीं, RPGs भी थीं और बाकी मुख्तलिफ चीज़ें थीं.
Pakistan has witnessed a dramatic upsurge in attacks since the Taliban seized control of Kabul in August 2021. Islamabad claims that these attacks, focused on its border regions with Afghanistan, are being launched from Afghan soil. The usual suspect in these attacks is the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which was founded in 2007, when Pakistani militants fighting alongside the Taliban in Afghanistan splintered off and began to target Islamabad as payback for supporting the US invasion after 9/11. The picturesque Swat Valley once had been a stronghold of Islamic militants who had imposed strict Sharia law there, until the Pakistani army flushed them out in 2009 and restored normalcy. But of late, this semblance of normalcy has been frequently shattered by militant attacks.
When I came to know about the blast last night, I was extremely grieved and rushed to the hospital along with some other people. We donated blood, talked to the medical officials, and went around to see the injured. Everyone is in a state of shock. The residents of the Mingora and Saudi towns in Swat district have given great sacrifices in the war against terrorism, and the hospital was overflowing with people clamoring to donate blood.
Insurgency has returned since November last year, when a ceasefire between the TTP and the Pakistani establishment ended. Since the beginning of this year, 2 major attacks on large police bases have been linked to the TTP. In January, more than 80 officers were killed in a suicide attack, targeting a mosque inside a police compound in Peshawar. The following month, 5 were killed when a TTP suicide squad stormed a police compound in the southern port city of Karachi, prompting an hours-long shootout. Is Pakistan losing its fight against a resurgent TTP? Well, given the frequent TTP attacks targeting its security forces, it certainly isn't helping the image or morale of the Pakistani security forces.
13 suspected gang members were reportedly beaten to death and set on fire by a mob in Haiti on the 24th of April. It was the most horrific instance of vigilante violence witnessed in recent history in Haiti. Later on the same day, 6 more gang members were allegedly killed by the police and later were burnt by the residents. The law and order situation has increasingly deteriorated in Port-au-Prince since the assassination of former President Jovenel Moïse in July 2021. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has termed the security situation in Haiti to be comparable to a nation that is at war.
Criminal gangs now control about 80% of the Port-au-Prince metropolitan area in Haiti. With close to 200 gangs operating with impunity, gunfights between police and gang members are fairly routine. Trapped in the crossfire, it is the local residents who bear the brunt. bloody turf wars between rival gangs have left hundreds dead and thousands displaced. This past Monday, encroaching gangs targeted the hilly suburbs of Haiti's capital but were met with stiff resistance.
The gang invaded us here in Canopy Word from the top of the hills at 2 a.m. Bullets were raining down everywhere and they surrounded the area. Women and children did not know where to go. So we took out our machetes, threw stones and they dispersed. The police met them on the way.
The same day, National Police said that its officers stopped and searched a minibus for contraband and confiscated weapons from suspects aboard. Soon thereafter, in an unfortunate episode of vigilante violence, a crowd took the suspected gangsters away from police, beat and stoned them before putting tires on them, pouring gasoline and burning them to death. The suspects are believed to be members of Craze Barrier gang, which translates to breaking barriers. They are led by Withtel Home innocent and accused in the 2021 kidnapping of 17 US missionaries. He is also linked to the assassination of former President Jovenel Moïse. Increasingly defiant, the residents are exhibiting a hitherto unseen determination to fight back.
If the gangs come to invade us, we will defend ourselves. We have our own weapons. We have our machetes. We will take their weapons. We will not run away. Mothers who want to protect their children can send them elsewhere.
Dozens of families left the neighborhoods caught in the spiral of violence. Reported homicides in Haiti have risen by 21% from 673 in the last quarter of 2022 to 815 in the first quarter this year. Equally alarming is the rise in reported kidnappings by 63% from 391 to 637. Between April 14 and 19, clashes between rival gangs left nearly 70 people dead, including 18 women and at least 2 children. At a time when no country has stepped forward to send assistance to help Haitian police restore order, this sudden surge of mob violence will only make the situation worse in a nation that is virtually run by criminal gangs.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of World at War. And if you want to reach out to me with any comments, feedback or suggestions, you can do so by tweeting to me on the Twitter handle that you see on your screens. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.